Visions, meet the visions, they're an artificial family. From the works of Marvel comes a thrilling comic book story. Behold, as these toasters come to life, try to tell apart what's wrong from right. Visions, meet the visions, they're the neighbors living next door. Uncanny horror, you'll have a great old time.
Since the series' release in 2015, The Vision by writer Tom King and artist Gabriel Hernandez Walta left an impact on readers that would go on to echo and garner more attention for its blend of unsettling horror and philosophical sci-fi. However, this isn't to say that the book's only appeal is its narrative content, as even the attention to detail to the series' form and execution demonstrate that this eventually Eisner Award-winning book was truly a calculated effort. In the complete edition of the series, the story is bookended with a foreword by humanist writer Rainbow Rowell, and a final essay by comic book medium analyst Hassan from Panel X Panel and Strip Panel Naked. I personally have a lot of respect for both writers, and I feel that their comments on The Vision reach towards some powerful elements that help build up the momentum behind the hardest hitting moments of all the story. Ranging from Chekhov's guns to literal points of view to demonstrate how other and foreign the Vision family is perceived, despite appearing as a quintessential suburban household. And in fact, it's this theme on the perception of otherness in the Vision that I'd like to explore the most. As fun as this little intro sequence was to make, this parody tries to describe the degree of separation and distance that both the other characters of the book and the reader themselves tend to perceive the Vision family, as a family that, to some extent, serves as a spectacle rather than fleshed out beings with personhood. The first few pages of the book's first issue emphasize how the family is seen more as fascinating subjects for observation, whether it be for entertainment or community concern. With a few handful of exceptions, the Visions are never respected enough to be treated as anything more than a family of second-class citizens. And in fact, a lot of the original concept art sketched for the series seem to really lean into this portrayal of the Vision and his kin. Now, this exploration of how humanity would, or should, treat more advanced robots is a century-old discussion at this point. And it's important to recognize that much of the attitudes towards social robotics have roots in the fantasies and fictions that captured the hearts of early sci-fi fanatics. Now, what's notable about the history of this discussion in science fiction is the consciousness that many of the social themes and social situations that these early pieces of AI media explored often seem to rhyme and resonate with the more tangible subjects of real-world race and racism. And this shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, considering we're talking about a genre that, dating as far back as Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, very often explores the subject of otherness within its text. Now, while the original use of the word robot, with its Czech roots in the word for slave, originally expressed concerns about the dehumanization of laborers in class relations, writer Robert Sparrow makes note in his article titled, "Do Robots Have Race?" When stories of robotics made their way to the United States, sci-fi authors wound up entwining the term with themes more closely relevant to colonialism, with anxieties of robot uprising and revolutions rooted in maltreatment towards their handlers, paranoia of race-related riots, to literal laws dictating and regulating robotic conduct in social settings, Jim Crow-like laws regulating the social interactions of people of color. It wouldn't be until decades later that robotic characters would be put under more empathetic lights, with media ranging from the original Blade Runner in 1982 to, more recently, Detroit Become Human, as their plights and struggles would resemble those of minorities in the country even more so, as they seek recognition and equal treatment. And the Vision series is both explicitly, as well as subtextually, an extension of this century-long discussion on the portrayal of robots and race. In fact, this allegorical use of the character of Vision as a stand-in for a person of color has rather significant precedent in Marvel's publication history. While issue 7 of King and Walta's story portray Vision and Wanda's marriage as a momentous ceremony of unity amongst so many walks of life, it conveniently omits the racially charged opposition and terrorism that surrounded the lead-up to their matrimony. Writer David Cantwell makes note in an article for The New Yorker on King and Walta's Vision that when he was a young boy reading comics, Vision was similarly being persecuted and attacked in 1973, within the pages of Avengers 113, by a supremacist hate group for the racially coded condition of being an android seeking to marry the Scarlet Witch. The hate group goes on about how allowing the synthezoid to have this degree of acceptance would legitimize forever the rights of an android in their society, which they cartoonishly exaggerate to be the first step in the rest of them becoming second-class citizens. In his article, Cantwell goes on to underline the social context that the country was living in at the time, as the Avengers issue had come out just a few years after the landmark civil rights ruling of Loving v. Virginia from the Supreme Court, which struck down interracial marriage bans as unconstitutional. In Cantwell's own words, "I was too young and uninformed when I first read the comic to cite that particular precedent. But growing up in working-class South Kansas City, Missouri, I couldn't miss the racial subtext." All of this serves to remind us that using narratives about robotics to talk about race, discrimination, and social justice is nothing new in science fiction, or even Marvel Comics. And so, while many readers and reviews of The Vision tend to fixate on the science-fictional philosophy that comes with positing the humanity that artificial intelligence can have, I've found that rereading the pages of the graphic novel brings more tangible social references to the behaviors and mannerisms of the Vision household. Now, the Vision family's behavior and treatment don't lead to a perfectly one-to-one comparison to any one group of marginalized people. Instead, there are several instances of overlap that allude to oppression and discrimination for a wide variety of populations. The characters are coded as victims of marginalization. Coding a character is a term in writing that refers to the act of giving a fictional character several traits that give them a likeness and familiarity to tangible, real-life groups of people for the audience. As I just said, the Vision family is coded in a way that alludes to the experiences of other marginalized people, and it's left to the reader to recognize the instances of marginalization and the systemic roots behind their treatment. Many readers often point to the first issue of the series as emblematic of the overall tone of the book. In the first issue, after the Vision household has welcomed their new neighbors into their home, husband and wife Vision and Virginia try to have a conversation about how pleasant their neighbors were, but end up talking more about how it is they're supposed to appropriately convey their thoughts on the neighbors. Were they kind, or were they nice? A lot of readers took this as an example of how, despite taking on the appearance of an all-American family, the Vision household is logical and unfeeling to their core. And it even plays into the stereotypical hijinks that ensues from robotic characters taking language too literally. A later scene in the same issue finds the son of the household, Vin, in the middle of a lesson at school when a classmate tries to get his attention, seconds before giving him a bit of existential trauma. Now, Vin's behavior in the build-up to this scene is personally so heartwarming because of how shy and nervous he is about his first day in a dramatically foreign social environment, and because of how formal and polite his language is, as he's trying to talk to another kid his own age. I would argue that both scenes carry a sort of subtext that codes the characters of the Vision family as being comparable to English language learners, They have a firm grasp of the vocabulary and grammar for sure, don't get me wrong, but they lack the fluency to navigate even the most casual of social situations. And at least from Vin's first real interaction with another classmate, the anxiety and concern that he displays very sweetly reminds me of many ELL students that I've had the privilege of working with. Now, this isn't to say that the Vision family serves as a sweeping representation of the wide population of people who've suffered prejudice stemming from their trouble speaking English. Instead, I see it as another trait in the list of ways that the reader can infer the family's social status as being perceived as other or outsider and vulnerable to persecution. And while the first issue presents the ways in which the Vision family may be discriminated against, the second issue begins to present instances where the other people of the Vision's world act on the biases and prejudices that they hold against the family of synthezoids. A classmate loses his patience with Vin to the point of preying on his otherness and using his robotic features to insult him. And even the school principal disrespects Vision and Virginia to their faces by challenging the personhood of their children and dismissively calling them guns instead of students. In issue 3, we get a better look at the undertone and unspoken attitudes that those around the neighborhood have towards Vision and his family, as we see xenophobic vandalism come from two meek and seemingly plain teenagers who wanted so much to insult and hurt Vision's household that they went out of their way to search the kind of hate speech people were using to degrade a family like Vision's. And by the 4th issue of the series, the parallels between the Vision's place in their suburban society and the micro to outright aggressive treatment towards actual people of color comes more plainly to light with Vision's not-so-subtle frustration with the blatantly racist caricature of a Native American, followed by a critique on the two-faced nature of societal discrimination. The children find themselves having to endure the animosity of their classmates for their otherness, and Virginia is blackmailed and later threatened outright under pretexts that they do not belong in a neighborhood like theirs. In the 5th issue, Vision is left to endure a predatory interrogation against his son's involvement in a murder by an institution that has a pretty significant history of preying on the vulnerability of marginalized people. All while the reader is left to contrast these baseless accusations with the 37 moments of heroism that remind the reader that Vision by no means deserves this prejudiced scrutiny. And not only Vision, but his family members as well. Out of all of the moments of the series, I find myself thinking a lot about the final few pages of the first issue of The Vision, when the family of synthezoids are attacked by the Grim Reaper out of blind rage and bigotry, when Vision is away from home. This one scene sets into motion every tragedy that follows this heartbreaking tale from King and Walta. And it also serves as just the excuse needed for skeptics of the synthezoid's domestic life to try and attack and legitimize their resentment towards the family of androids. This one scene is executed in a very specific way, but is later recounted almost antithetically afterwards. Desperately watching as the murderer approaches her son, after having already lacerated her daughter, Virginia grabs the closest thing she can to try and stop the Reaper, a steel baking tray of all things, and surprises the Reaper from behind by hitting him against the head with it. But in the very real, very human fear that can overtake a person when they're scared not just for their life, but also the lives of others, she doesn't stop beating the man after he's down, until she realizes he's never going to get back up again. This entire scene is framed as a horrific killing through the camera angles and the rhythm of the panel layout, despite realistically being one of the most empathetic and relatable scenes of the whole series for the desperation and fear it radiates from Virginia. What surprised me the most from this scene, the first time I saw it, was the noticeable absence of Virginia's powers. Oddly enough, when Virginia recounts the events of this night to both her husband and the authorities later in the series, she outright lies about how she killed the Grim Reaper, and weaves narratives where her powers were more core and instrumental to the outcome of what happened that night. Punching the man with super strength and blasting a hole through the wall, or burning him alive with her laser beam and spreading the ashes with her power of flight. With these false narratives, any person would have a much harder time relating with Virginia due to her fantastical powers. She just becomes another spectacle at this point, instead of a point of empathy like before. This falsified retelling of the death of the Grim Reaper manifests the anxieties and paranoia that others have had towards the Visions as volatile and dangerous weapons masquerading as a family. Yet, it's only a secret between Virginia, Vin, and the reader that the Grim Reaper's death did not come from the hands of some calculating machine who purposely sought to kill him. Instead, it came from the quintessential human concern of a mother fighting for her child and wasn't sure of what to do. A lot of readers latch on to the rhetoric put forth by Agatha Harkness in the 6th issue, P versus NP, where she frames the motives behind Vision's domestic and suburban life as having roots in a Sisyphean dream of being human. But, in my opinion, this is such a trivializing interpretation of the Vision and his family's actions. This claim is explicitly denied by Vision within the pages of this same issue, after his wife has confessed to him the danger that their family looms in. We would be subject to the whims of all the people who only see us as wires and electrodes. The people who do not understand what we are attempting to accomplish. Or rather, those who do not understand that we are not attempting to accomplish anything. We just are. The life of the Visions isn't this romanticized ideal of chasing an impossible dream of absurdly wanting assimilation. Perhaps it was in the beginning, but it certainly isn't now. In Vision's words, it's an unthreatening desire to just be as one is, and find validation as well as actualization. And yet, it's a life put under surveillance, criticized under scrutiny, and, when it's convenient, seen as nothing more than a spectacle. All of which are themes, scenes, and experiences that resonate with a wide range of marginalized people. Like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, King and Walta's Vision series has a variety of layers and complexities for analysis and exploration. It carries on the conversations and dialogues on themes that science fiction has been exploring since its inception, from formal topics like literature and mathematics to more abstract subjects like philosophy and justice. And so while the Vision can be read and appreciated for its multiple dimensions and facets, I feel like this interpretation that I presented just doesn't get talked about enough when I encounter the discourse around the book online. It's important to notice and recognize the social issues that surround the story's characters, not just because they're so core to the tragedy that befalls the family of synthezoids, but also because they're symptoms and echoes of the very real social issues that we still find in our world today. This has been Mel from New Comics. I hope you enjoyed the video.